We thank Lauren today for sharing her own journey with us. I also wanted to take the time to acknowledge this specific series is in collaboration with the Sustainable Fashion Initiative. These three amazing women are the reason that the Y-Line is here today. It is their passion and their vision that has made them change agents in their own right. They are working with us to bring Lauren here to campus and also to share her story with the Princeton community. So it is my honor to introduce Meg, Jenna, and Cornelia, who will introduce Lauren.
Thank you so much for joining us in the Sustainable Fashion Initiative's first event this semester. As a group of university students, we're building a socially and sustainably and environmentally responsible understanding of fashion on campus and investigating practices that enhance sustainability and the fashion industry as a whole. We can think of no better person to jumpstart the discussion than one of our favorite alumni and social entrepreneurs, Laura Bush.
As founder of Feed Projects LLC and Lauren Pierce Atelier, Lauren has truly paved the way exploring different models for using fashion to bring about positive change. Proceeds from sales of Feed's eco-friendly burlap bags have provided over 60 million school meals to children around the world since 2006. And the Lauren Pierce line celebrates human interconnectivity and empowerment through beautiful artisan fabrications designed and dyed by women in the Democratic Republic of the Congo.
Fashion can be a powerful vehicle for making the world a better place, for helping people to find their voice, and for ensuring the longevity of our planet's natural beauty. Please join us in welcoming Lauren to share with us how she is working to harness the collective power of fashion, philanthropy, and entrepreneurship to make a difference.
Thank you guys. Hi, thank you guys for coming. I know how busy student life is. I have my Small World coffee, a little jittery. But I'm so proud and excited to be here. And it's funny, this room, when I walked in, I realized this is the first room I ever was in at Princeton. I don't know, somehow my best friend who ended up actually going to Princeton with me at the time from high school, her brother was currently on the wrestling team when we were touring colleges, so we ended up somehow on the wrestling recruit tour of Princeton and ended up in this room with the coach of the wrestling team sort of drawing on the chalkboard, and definitely didn't think it was right for me at the time, but I'm so grateful and lucky and blessed that I had the opportunity to spend 4 years here. So enjoy every minute. It flies by. It feels like it was yesterday. I think I want to start my talk just sort of talking about first my experience at Princeton, and it's sort of one of those things that in retrospect it all kind of makes sense now, but at the time it seemed just like a lot of random interests and activities that I was involved in here, and then right after college that kind of have now culminated into what I'm doing for my career with Feed and with Lauren Pierce. So originally I studied anthropology. My anthropology professors are here, which is wonderful and intimidating. And I was very interested in development work. I took Peter Singer's ethics class. I was very, very interested also in fashion at the time. So I would do sort of summer internships at different fashion houses. But I found fashion, just for fashion's sake, a little bit, not shallow, but just it didn't have enough depth. And so in thinking of what I wanted to do when I was going to graduate, I sort of said, gosh, I'm either going to become a fashion designer or I'm going to become a humanitarian aid worker like in Burma or in Africa. And I really left Princeton not having a job and not really knowing what I wanted to do, but knowing I wanted to go in these two directions. So to back up a little bit, really just kind of start my exploration was starting to take anthropology classes and travel and learn about development. And then my sophomore year here at Princeton, I had the amazing opportunity to travel around the world with the UN World Food Program, who at the time I didn't know much about, and they were looking to start a Students Fighting World Hunger campaign, and they needed a student spokesperson. So they called upon me, and obviously I was interested. At the time, like I said, I was taking Peter Singer's ethics class, and I had actually wanted to, I'm a lifetime vegetarian, so I was really into sort of his animal rights and all that stuff, and I wanted to be assigned the paper on animal rights, but for some reason I was assigned the paper on hunger. And I was like, this is all very interesting timing, and after writing that paper, I got the call from the World Food Program, so I feel like it was somewhat meant to be. I'd already kind of intellectually started grappling with these issues. And my first trip with the World Food Program was to Guatemala. And Guatemala, has anyone here been to Guatemala? Oh, one person. It's beautiful and very close to America. And I think the perception of hunger is that it's this very far away, Africa, social situation, and it's not. It's obviously it's here in America in a different way, but literally a 3.5-hour flight from New York, it's Guatemala, which is this, very beautiful mountainous country with a lot of indigenous people. Yet hunger is very much persistent, and you'll see kids who may be getting enough, rice and beans and tortillas to feel full, but it's not the right nutrients they need to really grow and thrive. So it was really from these firsthand, travels and experiences. What I saw on this initial trip, first they took me to a place called a therapeutic feeding center, and it's a place where kids are taken when they're, literally on the brink of starvation. And it was obviously so heart-wrenching to see little kids who are physically, suffering, and their growth has been stunted. One little boy in particular who, I'll never forget, was 7 years old, but he looked like he was 4, and he could only be carried. He was that weakened because he had been that chronically malnourished. And you see their, the families and the suffering because these kids are obviously kind of near death. And some pull through, some don't, once you get to that sort of dramatic stage of hunger. But obviously that was the moment when it became extremely real to me that hunger isn't something that, as we all feel before lunch or whatever, before dinner, you get a little hungry. This is on such a different level where you're literally, you look into the eyes of children who should be much more vibrant and active, and they're just more placid. And their brain growth has also been stunted because of hunger. And it is just this lottery system. It's because they were born where they're born. It's not because of anything they've done. It's not necessarily because of anything their families have done. And so, really being confronted with that issue firsthand was extremely life-changing. And then on the more hopeful part of that trip was school feeding. And school feeding is something similar to what our government does here. When kids can't afford a school lunch, the government steps in and will subsidize school lunches. Whether or not those lunches are healthy is another issue, but in countries like Guatemala, there's no safety net, or there's a very little safety net. So that's when the World Food Program and aid organizations do play a role in stepping in and providing, providing food aid. And what school feeding does, which is different from what most food aid is it's giving kids around the world, if they go to school, a nutritious school lunch. And what that generally is a corn-soya blend. So it's this mixture of soy and corn and nutrients. So it's nutrient fortified. So if this is the one meal these kids will get a day, it's enough to sort of sustain them and help them grow and lead healthy lives. And the great implication of this program is that kids will go to school, parents will send their kids to school just to get this lunch meal. And often, if it's the only lunch meal, again, they have a day, it's enough to get them through to the next day. Obviously not ideal, but it's better than nothing. And what I really loved, and I wonder if you guys would agree with this, is in countries where girls' education just isn't valued, they send girls who have a good attendance record, they'll send the girls home with extra food rations for her family. So it's a really interesting way to kind of influence that culture and give girls a chance to be educated in societies where, it's much more important to educate the sons and the boys first than it is the girls and the women. And the girls who are educated, it's been widely proven that it's one of the best ways to break this poverty cycle, because girls will tend to have less kids, they'll get married later in life. The kids they do have will be much better educated and much better, they're healthier and better fed. So it's a really wonderful sort of no-brainer program, the school feeding. And what really kind of I racked my brain about, I'd come back from these trips, and the cost to give a school meal is so little. So just this small world coffee I'm drinking is $4. And I had a snickerdoodle. So together it's $4. And that would have given 16 school meals. And I would come back from these trips, and I obviously still do it, and you just do the math in terms of what we're spending here and how far and how necessary it could go, in these developing countries, that money could go. And I would just rack my brain, and I would come back and I would be inspired, but also I would say very frustrated that I personally, as a young person, couldn't just write $1 million check to the UN World Food Program and feed all these children who really needed help. But also I was, at the time, as a student spokesperson, I would go and speak to different colleges and different student groups, and I feel as a young person, there's so much passion and want to make the world a better place, and the real question is just how, and especially with world hunger. So I would give my spiel, I would show my pictures. I also studied photography here, and I would explain what I'd seen in school feeding and how important that is. It's being done in 62 of the poorest countries around the world, and how many kids are relying on that school lunch meal as sort of a bare minimum to what they're going to get to eat that day. And I would just walk away from these talks and feel extremely frustrated that I didn't, A, know what to do myself, but B, didn't know how to inspire others, especially young people, to do more. And it was on different travel, another trip I took to Cambodia a few years later, that I sort of had this aha moment of, gosh, food is being distributed in bags. Everyone here owns a bag. Reusable bags are extremely important. I studied abroad also when I was here at Princeton in Australia. And in Australia, it's very, if you don't have your reusable shopping bag, when you go to the grocery store, it's very taboo to take out plastic or paper. So they're a bit ahead of America in the whole reusable bag movement. So all these sort of thoughts and factors collided, and I thought of the very simple idea, which was the feed one bag. And the idea was intended originally for the UN World Food Program. I said, I'll make this bag, I'll figure out how to produce it and warehouse it, I'll sell it, I'll market it. Again, drawing on the fact that I love design and really thought this would be an interesting way to communicate this, huge, overwhelming, seemingly very far away social issue, and make it really tangible for people. And so the original idea was this bag, which is the feed. This is a little bit of a take on it, which I'll pass around later. This is the feed one bag. And for every bag sold, we're able to feed a child in school for a year. And I thought, gosh, that's so simple that, it costs so little to do so much again. And why not just build that cost into the cost of the bag and sell the bag? And I originally wanted the bag, I thought Whole Foods. It's important while you're shopping for others and shopping for your family and yourself, to think of others who can't afford food and who need help and assistance. So I sort of set my mind on getting them involved, and actually John Mackey came and spoke at Princeton when I was a student here, and I luckily had my first prototype of the Feed One bag, and I thought, yes, stars are aligning, it's going to happen. And I finagled myself to get invited to this smaller dinner he did with a handful of students after, and I positioned myself next to him, and I positioned the bag, in eyesight, and I thought, yeah, this is really going to happen now. And he was very kind and very receptive, but at the end of a full evening of talking to students, I think he was a little tired when at the end of the night I was like, but wait, I have this great idea, we're going to feed people through this reusable bag, and no. So he introduced me to someone who then eventually said, you know what, we're really focused on obesity issues at this time. So I was like, okay, obviously that's important, but feeding people is important too. Why not do the both? I'm not asking you to abandon whatever corporate social responsibility moment or mission you're having right now. So feeling a little dejected, but in the midst of my thesis and figuring out what I was going to do with my life, I said, okay, I'll put this on hold and I'll revisit the feed bag, because it's going to happen when I graduate, and then I'll get a job. So I graduated, again, not really knowing what I was going to do, knowing fashion or humanitarian work or somewhere in either of those realms was where I probably belonged, but again, not knowing. So it's good not to know. I felt around me were a lot of people who had jobs. So I'm just reiterating that it's okay not to know and to sort of struggle for a little bit of time if you can. I think that the first year out of college was the most difficult year of my life, but by far the most important. And I was constantly busy and working. It wasn't that I was just taking it easy, but I didn't have that sort of 9-to-5 job that maybe wasn't a perfect fit for me. So taking a little bit of time and whether you figure out in college or after, just kind of thinking through and struggling with what you really want to do, for me was so critical, and I owe everything I'm doing now to that sort of year of pain in a 6th floor walk up in the Lower East Side. Back to feed. So I had the bag. I had approached Whole Foods, who I thought was the ideal, most perfect retailer for the feed bag and the feed mission, and got nowhere. I then went to the World Food Program. So I originally intended the bag to be sold by the UN World Food Program to benefit their school feeding program. Very simple, and I would do I would put all the pieces together. They don't need to, figure out the nuances of shipping from a factory to a warehouse and all that stuff. And at the end of the day, at the 18th hour, I had Amazon.com, was ready to place an order. So I was like, gosh, we're finally in business. And the World Food Program, who does, they deliver food, they feed the world. They're the largest humanitarian agency in the world, yet no one really knows of them because they don't market themselves very well. Came to me and said, we're a UN organization. We can't be the sellers of a bag, which at the time was like, gosh, but I've been showing you this bag for years. Like, I'm ready to go now. And it was a bit of a setback, very frustrating, but it was the moment when I started feed very organically and naturally, just literally to fulfill this first order of feed bags to Amazon.com in hopes that it would take off. And it did. So it was actually really lucky that the World Food Program said, look, we're doing what we're doing well, which is feeding the world. We don't have time to produce and market and sell bags, but why don't you start a company and you do it. So that was the moment when I started Feed. I had a partner who at the time was the kind of insider at the World Food Program who was really championing the idea internally and said, gosh, I don't think it's going to happen internally. Let's go and do it ourselves. So we worked out of apartments for 3.5 years, and eventually going back to Whole Foods, again, I was kind of dead set on like Whole Foods has to be like the ideal partner, but Amazon.com was a wonderful place to start because no matter where you are in the world or in America, you can order off Amazon.com. It doesn't mean you have to be close to a physical store. So it was wonderful, and they built out a boutique page, and they had a video and pictures, and they really kind of told the feed story, which is so essential, I think, to any do-gooder product. Obviously, it's not just about the product; it goes way deeper than that. And they understood that. And then, right off the bat, we were able and fortunate to get some good media stories and good press stories because, again, how many times can fashion writers or whoever write about the new purple or the new satin or the new whatever? Again, a do-gooder product or something that has a bit more of a mission behind it gives writers and journalists more to talk about. And to this day, now Vogue has a dedicated page called Fashion Ethics. Marie Claire constantly big established fashion magazines have carved out space because there's such a demand and a need to highlight these products that aren't just products for product's sake. They're really, have this social mission embedded in them. So still just with the Feed 1 bag, I came up with the great idea of doing a Feed 2 bag, charging more for it. It would feed 2 kids in school. It would just have a messenger strap, a little addition. So the idea was born to do different feed bags, varying in price. The higher priced bags would obviously give more meals, feed more kids. The lower priced items, we now do a little Feed 5 bracelet that's $15 and that gives 5 meals. So anyone can participate. It's really meant to be a product and a brand that whether you're shopping at Bergdorf Goodman or whether you're shopping at the Gap or wherever, you can participate in Feed and you can support our mission through buying our products. So the second bag was the Feed 2 bag, which was a messenger strap bag. And then the third bag, we finally, my partner at the time, met someone in a bar who knew a gourmet food buyer in a random, northeast region of Whole Foods. So we were like, oh, our in. So you think, John Mackey and the CEO and founder of Whole Foods would have been the appropriate channel to go, but it wasn't. In the end, it was this random connection. And we found our sort of internal champion. And through that, this woman helped introduce us, because it's a regional buying system, to all 12 different regions, because each store has autonomy to sort of say, we want the bag, we don't want the bag. So that process was really interesting, which resulted in kind of a across the country tour of sorts, to get buy-in from every region to say, yes, we're going to support the feed bag and the feed program. And we created the Feed 100 bag, which it's kind of been our most widely sold bag, so you might have seen it, but it's a zip-up pouch, and you unzip it, and out comes a bag. So it's easy when you're not grocery shopping to tuck it into another bag, and then when you need that extra bag, you just unzip and go. So we were really excited about the design and about finally kind of having Whole Foods on board, and every region ended up signing on, and they bought a total of 420,000 bags, which was just mind-boggling. And at that point, we went to China. We were using organic cotton and natural burlap, so eco-friendly materials. Went and checked on all the factories to make sure everything was good, had auditors, and did the whole thing. Came back to America, and then actually some of the top people at Whole Foods said, okay, we're essentially spending millions and millions of dollars on your program and donating millions and millions of dollars. We want to go with you to see what this money's doing, which was wonderful. So we decided together that the money would go specifically to help school feeding in Rwanda, because we wanted to have a measurable impact in one country, instead of just giving it, which we do most of the time, generally to the UN World Food Program or UNICEF, to their specific programs. We wanted to say, this money's going to this specific country. And because Rwanda is a fairly smallish country, we were able to feed the entire school population of Rwanda for a year, just through that partnership. So that, to me, was obviously such a triumphant moment, to not only get to this partner that I really felt was always right for this concept, but then to go and to visit, every school child we saw in Rwanda would be fed by our partnership and by our donation. And one of the most fascinating parts of our trip, well, two. So we were with Whole Foods executives, one guy who went to high school with John Mackey and who now worked closely with him and was an initial investor in Whole Foods, came with us with his son. And it was right before Whole Foods was about to ban plastic bags, which they've now done for a few years. They only use paper bags, which are more easy to recycle and reuse. So we sat down with the environmental minister in Rwanda. In Rwanda, if anyone, who's been there? You guys gotta go. It's really beautiful, and it's really beautiful because they've outlawed plastic bags in Rwanda, which is pretty amazing. So if you're trying to go through the metal detector to get into Rwanda, they will confiscate your plastic bags from you. But as a result, the country is pristine. And in most countries that aren't as developed, there's less of a waste system and trash pickup schedule and all that stuff. So in a lot of countries, plastic bags and trash are sort of, unfortunately, are part of sort of the everyday scene. But in Rwanda, it's beautiful. It's really, really beautiful. There's no plastic. And we asked the environmental minister, why did they make that move, which seems, so far ahead for even a developed nation like America. We can barely put taxes on plastic bags, which is another thing. But in Rwanda, they've totally outlawed. And the reason for that, this woman, Dr. Rose, explained, was that it was a health concern. So when it rained, plastic bags that would inevitably be strewn about collect water, and stagnant water leads to mosquito breeding, which leads to malaria. So they actually did it not for environmental reasons, but for health reasons. But as a result, it's also a very beautiful country that it's environmentally much better than other nations who have not done so. So that was an interesting little factoid. It just shows you, and it was fascinating to sit there with this head of development for Whole Foods, hearing from this environmental minister of Rwanda why they've outlawed plastic bags. And then a few months later, they decided to outlaw plastic bags. So I don't know if it was a direct influence, but it was pretty neat, the cross-cultural sort of exchange of ideas and learnings from that. And the other thing, when we visited Rwanda, we were visiting a school, and there was a little girl who seemed more precocious. And often when I travel, what I love to do most is visit schools, because kids are so fun and playful and curious, and you're sort of interrupting their school day, which they love. And you know, we all kind of roll in and distract things. But this one little girl was kind of sticking to my side. So I never quite know when I travel. You should ask kids, because we're all brought up with people asking us every 5 seconds, what do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to do when you grow up? And there, you just don't know if these kids are ever asked that, or ever taught to dream, you know, beyond getting through primary school or secondary school. You hope they are, and obviously many are, but as an outsider, I never quite know how to engage in that conversation with kids, and if that's something, especially for girls, again, that they're not quite taught to think of. And this little, but I thought this little girl seems very outgoing. I might as well ask, and I asked her, and she said, "I want to be the president of Rwanda." And it was like this amazing, it makes me cry. Sorry. This is an amazing moment that this little girl was dreaming so big in surroundings that were desolate compared to what we've, you know, grown up with. Sorry. But it showed not only, you know, she's in school, she's wearing her clean, neatly pressed uniform, and she's dreaming big. And to me, that was like such a huge, huge moment to really show the impact that education has, that, you know, school food, everything influences. I'm not saying school food alone is going to make this little girl become president, but it's a start. And I think it's just about, you know, giving kids that little bit of a start. So we've gone on to work with UNICEF and other organizations like Room to Read and Millennium Villages, and many others around the world as well, because it's about getting, you know, UNICEF does this great vitamin A program that gives kids vitamin A and micronutrient powder. So in countries where kids may be getting food, but they're not getting the right type of food or enough of a balanced diet, it's sort of a multivitamin that you sprinkle over their food. And it's tasteless, kids don't mind it, and it doesn't require water, which might be, you know, not sanitary or dirty. And kids are able, through all these things, to, you know, just have a bit of a better chance. So it's just been this amazing, you know, journey through feed. And part of that too, what I always love to do, as the shopper in me loves to go and shop when I'm in these countries, and I'm so fascinated, and I love to learn about whatever traditional craft or you know, technique is being practiced in all these different countries. And I find it so beautiful and so authentic that people, you know, people literally like handmade something. I think we, you know, kind of take that for granted in this day and age, because so little of what we wear and consume is actually handmade and hand done. So in traveling, and you literally, in Cambodia, I remember visiting these women. This woman had started her own little business, and she had hired, you know, 4 of her neighboring women, and they were all HIV positive. And they were weaving these beautiful, beautiful scarves, yet culturally no one would buy them because they had AIDS, and that wasn't right, or the community around them wasn't being supportive. So they didn't have a market to sell their goods. So there's people, you know, they know how to help themselves. They know how to make beautiful things and, you know, celebrate their culture and their traditional craft, yet there's not necessarily anywhere to sell them unless you're in a country with, you know, a lot of tourism. And I found this very perplexing, because it's so much more beautiful and interesting than what you would find going into a standard store or boutique here, but yet it wasn't easy to find. So we started at Feed working with artisan groups as well to make some of our bags. So we worked with the groups in Guatemala. So I went back to Guatemala last year and visited this cottage industry where in one person's house, everyone's working out of each other's houses. They're weaving, and then they're brought to another house to cut, the other house to like screen print the burlap patch, the other house to sew. So it's really this community production chain, which is pretty fascinating. And the end product is very quality, very beautiful. It's exactly what we need it to be. I think that's obviously part of it, is that the product has to be quality enough and beautiful enough that stores, who we then go on and sell it to, are going to want to reorder it and are proud of what they're selling. So that was just amazing. And then we also visited, while we were there, like I mentioned, the micronutrient powder program. So that bag came full circle. It's made in Guatemala, and it goes back to benefit Guatemala. And we've now done that with a group of a women's factory in Liberia, coming out in May in partnership with Godiva for Mother's Day. We're making these fun, colorful bags, and they'll be filled with chocolate, of course. And we do that, you know, in different countries. And then that also inspired me to do more, because I thought, okay, beyond bags and accessories, a lot of this fabric is so beautiful and it'd be wonderful to make as a designer. Again, it's so inspiring and so unique. So why not make clothes out of it? So I again, kind of started a little nighttime project, a little clothing line called Lauren Pierce Atelier. And with that, we were able to sell in Barney's for years, and now we're selling in Calypso. And it's there's a group of women, about 12 women in the Congo, who go through this program called Women for Women International, which is a wonderful organization. And they bring women in war-torn sort of conflict areas, and these women are given group therapy, first of all, because many of them have been raped or have seen, you know, massive amounts of violence in their lifetime. And they're taught to read, they're taught their legal rights. You know, a lot of these women just have never had anyone say to them, you shouldn't be beaten by your husband, or it's not okay that, yeah, you're not sending your girl to school, or, you know, your kids to school. You should put that money towards them and not to your husband's gambling fund, or what. It's a sort of support group. So these women graduate from that program, and then they're able and encouraged and given a stipend to start their own business, or, you know, pay for a new roof for their house, or put their kids to school, or whatever they need the money for. No one's dictating to them what they should do with it. But a group of women got together and said, we're going to start this fabric dyeing co-op. And it's beautiful. And I brought some samples. I'll do a little show and tell. Because it's wonderful, beautiful, very unique. Each is one of a kind, obviously, because each is literally, the women pick out the colors, they pick the patterns, they get together, and they dye fabric. And again, it was the issue that they could dye fabric on and on and on, but there was no market. There was, beyond local markets, there wasn't a real demand for their product that would take them to the next level and really give them a sustainable livelihood. So we, with Lauren Pierce, the thought was, gosh, this fabric's so beautiful, so unique. Why not, you know, try to craft it and design it into a silhouette that's wearable, that's something that I and my friends and my sister and my mom would want to wear, and sell it to a Western retailer. So Barney's was the one who's a little more avant-garde, and I thought would be a little more receptive to the idea. And they were, and we were able to do something that was really neat 2 years ago, where I designed 5 different dress silhouettes. So you may like them all, you may prefer one to the other, because each woman's different, each body shape's different. And then you would pick your shape, pick your size, try it on, and then physically pick your bolt of fabric that you wanted your dress cut from. So it's really this kind of atelier model where we are not hand making, but we are making specifically for you from the fabric you want, the dress you want. So really, and each fabric came with the name of the woman who dyed that piece of fabric. And each dress comes with the name of the woman who dyed that piece of fabric that dress was made into. So really connecting people through, you know, from beginning of the process of sourcing the fabric to the end buyer of the dress, and kind of connecting that cycle, because often it is such a faceless cycle. And gosh, I'll pass this around. These are just some scarves. So we ended up sending silk to not just, we used also cotton that they dyed. But you'll just see, I mean, look how, it's just so beautiful. These color patterns and, here, you can pass it around. So these we ended up selling in Barney's too. This is a bag that hasn't come to be yet, but I wanted to bring it to show you. So it's a Feed One bag, but then we lined it in this really fun, you know, one-of-a-kind, again, hand-dyed fabrics. You can pass that around too. And the idea as well behind Lauren Pierce was to utilize, so everything that's not artisan made is actually eco-friendly. So we use hemp silks, you know, they have, what is it called? Hemp silks, soy silk. I mean, there's amazing stuff that's being done in the realm of eco-fabrics that, you know, there's so much innovation out there. And yes, it's a little more expensive, but the fact is with Feed and with Lauren Pierce, I've seen it to be true, which I think is kind of the common understanding now, that people, consumers are willing to pay more if there's a real story, a real mission behind it, and if they know in a very transparent way where the money's going and who it's helping. So with every feed product we do, we have the number, and that signifies very clearly how many kids are being fed, how many meals are being given, how many micronutrient powder packets are being given, and then a lengthy sort of hang tag describing it more. And with everything we do with Lauren Pierce, it's you know, we have the name of the woman who actually did it. So it's all kind of a work in progress, but we're a team of 6. We're all girls, which is really fun. And just being, you know, a social entrepreneur, just an entrepreneur in general, is just so invigorating. And each day is something different. And to wake up and to, you know, feel so alive with, and so impassioned with what we're doing, and to know, you know, gosh, if I could sell 1 bag today, we fed a child in school for a year, to have that tangible impact for every single product we sell, it's just been hugely rewarding. So I don't want to talk too much more. I'd rather take questions. I'm sure I forgot something, but, oh, thank you. Questions? Yeah.
How long were you in business before you turned a profit so that you could give some of it away?
Good question. So from the get-go, we, the whole model of building the donation into the cost of our goods was always what we were doing. So it was never a thing, which I think it is more with traditional business, where if we sell, if we reach this profit mark, we can then give X amount away. So from the get-go, Amazon placed an order for 500 bags, and I knew it's going to cost X amount of money to produce those bags, but then 3 months later, we'll be paid for those bags. So we started with my original initial investment in just buying those bags, getting that money from Amazon, and then giving a good portion of it away. And actually, that original order, because it was a bit before I was thinking, okay, in order to be a sustainable business, there are going to be costs like, you know, office costs and hiring people, and that's been a bit of a learning process, because originally I did the math wrong and I was losing 9 cents a bag. So we quickly fixed that problem, and now are very cognizant of building in a good enough margin to pay our rent and pay expenses, but we're still a very lean operation. And actually, it's an interesting book I read recently that kind of was like, oh, someone's finally put into words what we are, was Muhammad Yunus's social business book. That really, it's about obviously businesses that are set out to do good for the world. It's businesses where owners don't take, I'm not going to, you know, cash in on Feed and buy a yacht. He kind of lays out all the principles of what defines a social business versus a normal business. And it really is kind of this growing movement, I think, of people, especially young people, who want to start businesses but want for a good part of that to go back to help, whether it's in services they're giving or whether it's, you know, through profits. So anyone who's interested, I would recommend checking out that book, Social Business. Mm-hmm.
What advice would you give to aspiring entrepreneurs?
Good question. I think For me, it was just I had sort of very specific ideas and just kind of believing in yourself. And the more I've gone, the more advice I take. I think originally I was more stubborn and sort of like, I just want to make this bag happen. And there were a lot of naysayers initially, and people have come around. So I think it's a balance between, listening to people who know a lot more than you do and have a lot more wisdom and experience, but also if you're doing something different and people don't quite understand it, also really believing in yourself and also partnering. I mean, I think if I see a lot of times people out there like, well, just trying to do their own thing for the sake of doing their own thing, and often there maybe is something out there that could use your improved, take on it, or something that doesn't necessarily require you to go out and start a whole new thing. So working together, not working in silos, that often happens, unfortunately, in the nonprofit world, because everyone's sort of competing for the same fundraising dollars, which is a real shame. So yeah, but I think ultimately, if you feel like you really have something that's important and meaningful and will add something new to the world, just try it. You're not going to lose anything, is what I would say, yeah.
Once you had the idea of this bead bag in your head, what did you do next? How did you choose a factory?
So this was a big part of where I was like, I need some advice, because I have no idea where to start. And I had done a little bit of modeling previously, and I went to people in the fashion industry, and I just said, okay, here's the idea. I want to make a bag. How do I do it? And eventually someone introduced me to a guy who knew, this wonderful factory they'd worked with in China that they felt had audited and again felt okay with. And they also helped me I knew burlap, and I knew I wanted organic cotton and reversible, but how to make that, how to make that idea into a design, a spec, into a physical bag. So I just, went out there for advice. And I think nowadays too, so much information's online so advice and just research was how it sort of originally happened. Where to start? Sorry, you, second row, and then we'll get you first row.
I was really struck by how many amazing people you seem to have around you and how much networking played a role, like knowing someone who knew someone.
Yeah.
So I suppose inquisitiveness is really important, like asking and being curious.
Mm-hmm.
But I was hoping maybe you could talk about one of the biggest setbacks you faced. It sounded like it was very serendipitous, a lot of things fell into place, but I know you must have faced some setbacks. So I was hoping you could talk about that and what you did to advance yourself again.
For sure, yeah. It's funny standing here and telling the story, because it does all seem like this seamless sort of journey, and it was not, and still is not, I would say, to be very honest. I mean, we have a more established brand now, so it greases the wheels a little bit, but every day we're figuring something out, or we're realizing we kind of went down the wrong path. So it's sort of this constant learning, obviously. But I think, networking does play a huge part of it, and it could just be at a party you meet someone who's sort of interested in helping and knows someone at a store. I mean, you just kind of have to be, I think for me now too, it's about figuring out how best to use my time. So on one hand, you can network yourself to death and waste a lot of time, and I see some people who go from conference to conference to conference, and you're like, you're not really working if you're just going to conferences and networking. Yet a few conferences a year I think is really beneficial, not just to sort of spread the word, but to meet people in sort of like industries doing similar things. So setbacks, I mean, the whole thing has been, so that the original 500 bags, we had them shipped to JFK, and we got a call saying, okay, we need your broker to come and broker them through customs. So we're like, we have no idea what that means. We're just gonna go and pick them up. So we rented a minivan. I had a sinus infection, and we went to pick up our bags at JFK, and like hours and hours later, we figured out we really need like a true customs broker who knows this stuff. So eventually we triumphed, and the man behind the customs desk, because we were literally there all day, and he sort of took pity on these two girls who had no idea what they were doing, actually bought our first feed bag. So he was our first customer. And then we, took them out. We rented the van. We didn't realize how big, 500 bags. We didn't know what that looks like. So we had to take them out of the boxes and like literally physically shove them all one by one into this van that was like about to pop from bags. So all of those moments, you know, we could have easily said, oh, forget this. We're gonna go home and call, I don't know, figure it out. But it is in that persistence and those adventures that I have my fondest memories of starting Feed and continue to. So I think it's a bit about being persistent and knowing that you're going to mess up and not being too hard on yourself. Feed turned 5 on February 2nd. So we're newly 5 years old, which is sort of this threshold we've crossed in terms of just being more strategic. And, you know, before I'd meet someone and they say, let's partner, and I'd be like, yes. And I mean, more thought than that, but it was much more of an emotional kind of gut reaction. And now we have contracts and we do things a little differently and a little more properly. So it's kind of harnessing that entrepreneurial, you know, design and fun with the more practical, more strategic thinking, which has been my biggest lesson. Oh, sure.
Could you talk about the process that you and your partners go through when you're deciding which programs, such as school feeding, micronutrients, that you want to invest in?
Well, first, it really started organically with the school feeding. Going forward, though, now that we're branching out to different support, not just school feeding, but UNICEF and, like I said, Room to Read and other causes, it has been a bit of an organic process. Like we'll learn about micronutrient powder and we'll say, gosh, that's really in keeping and fitting within the feed mission. Let's figure out how to support it. So it's been a bit of back and forth. And with Room to Read, for example, they're this amazing organization that builds libraries around the world. And we were in talks with Barnes & Noble. And they said, gosh, we'd really love to do something with you, but we can't because we're really focused on literacy. So we said, okay, we can marry the both. And so we created the Feed Read 3 bag that gives 3 school lunches and 3 local language books to schools in Asia, in different regions of Asia. So I think it's been a bit of a back and forth. Like it wouldn't have originally occurred to me to per se support Room to Read, although I admire them and think they're doing great things. But it really just came about because Barnes & Noble said, we're not going to work with you unless you support something that's literacy-based. The other great thing, which I think I haven't mentioned yet, we are supporting people and kids in America. So we partnered with DonorsChoose.org, which again doesn't seem like a congruous fit for Feed, yet when thinking of how to enter America and school feeding again is being done here, and it's subsidized by the USDA, and the government steps in, and that's who's sort of dictating and providing the school lunches, yet the quality of the food obviously is not very good. And we've talked and met with various executive chefs, they're called, of different regions like New York City and New Haven, and these guys were actually chefs. And they're themselves obviously appalled by what they're having to serve, yet they're only given X amount of dollars to feed X amount of kids. And so you can only go so far with that. But the answer I found then, I was like, gosh, I'm not gonna lobby. I don't wanna do that. So how can we affect change with school meals? So we partner with Donors Choose to encourage teachers to apply for things like salad bars or cooking class kits or industrial sized blenders to make fresh fruit smoothies or school garden kits. So ways to improve school lunches and nutrition education for kids in America. And we then partnered with The Gap to bring in the commercial side and did Feed USA bags. And with every bag came a hang tag that has a gift certificate, essentially. So you, as the buyer of the bag, have made a $5 donation to our Feed USA platform, but if you so choose, the money's gonna go regardless. You can go on and select, I wanna support Miss Cooney's school garden project in Wyoming. You can literally pick the specific teacher project within the Feed USA realm that you wanna support. So that was sort of our entree into food issues. And now since then we've launched, there's show and tell. This is my actual bag, Feed NYC. And that gives 10 meals to hungry New Yorkers. So supporting as well domestic hunger, which is a big focus for us this year. And this bag also is made in New York, so supporting sort of that industry as well in New York. Long answer, sorry. Sure.
Did you ever have to like take a step back, like while you were doing the business, and like maybe like read books, like look at courses, and just kind of learn as you go?
Definitely learn as you go, because if you stop, then you might, I don't know, you can't kind of stop. Once you're in it, it's sort of an everyday, things are coming at you and you want to keep the ball rolling forward. But I definitely have read a ton of books, and again, I now kind of assimilated a board of advisors, which essentially means these are people I can call upon at any hour of any day and sort of say, gosh, the bags are stuck in customs, what do we do? And I've established a great team around me. So, you know, one of the main issues initially was that we didn't know the first thing about supply chain management or shipping, and we shipped 100 bags to Africa, backpacks. And our factory in China stuffed the backpacks full of paper, so they're pretty when they arrived, and they put like 2 or 3 backpacks in massive boxes and then shipped them by air to Kenya. So we got the bill, and it would have bankrupted our company. It was tens of thousands of dollars, just because we didn't know the first thing about shipping and didn't realize, and we should have realized, that air shipping, you know, 100 bags in 3 per box would literally be a full plane going to Kenya. And a girl came to our office to sort of say, what are you guys doing? Who was our UPS account manager, and we ended up hiring her. So she now prevents that from ever happening again, thank God, and handles, you know, all of our warehousing and logistics. So it's sort of just about, for us, or for me, it's been just realizing the most gaping holes in our team or in our knowledge, and either filling them with advisors or with sort of outside companies that we can work with, or just, you know, literally bringing people in-house when we can. Mm-hmm.
Hi, my name is Rachel. Do you have any ideas of maybe expanding it to other causes, not only like feeding malnourished children? And then another quick question, for students on campus who are involved in kind of like sustainable fashion ideas,
Mm-hmm.
and are very interested in kind of what you're doing, what would you recommend? Or does FEED have any like volunteer opportunities or things of that sort?
Thank you. So first, on the feed side or the volunteer side, we do have interns. We love our interns. So if you're interested, come find me. And we're just kind of ramping that up and trying to figure out more, because we love to sort of harness that energy, but at the same time, just figuring out kind of we don't want people to just be sitting. I did an internship one summer where I wasn't really needed, and it was just a waste of everyone's time. So really, we put people to work, which I think is beneficial for everyone. I think in terms of sustainable fashion, I mean, beyond just feed, and which is sustainable, but also the give back, I think regular, more traditional fashion companies are looking to incorporate sustainability more and more into their lines. So I definitely see, and I think everyone sees, it's this coming thing that's brewing, that more and more young people with great ideas and specific knowledge about that is really important. The girl I work with on Lauren Pierce, for example, she was working at a nonprofit called Earth Pledge, and Earth Pledge put on this fashion show where they got all the biggest designer names to design looks out of eco-friendly materials. So I sort of went to Earth Pledge in researching and wanting to learn more about what sustainable fabrications were even out there, and met this wonderful girl who had, you know, catalogs and catalogs of what's available. And she's sort of, you know, has been helpful ever since. So I think there's a growing need. It's definitely a niche, but I know in talking to big companies and in working now with big companies, they're wanting this sort of do-gooder message. They want an emotional connection to their customers, especially young people who really care about these issues. So if you can be that kind of niche to fill it, or that, you know, insider employee who can offer that specific knowledge, I think that's a real opening. Yeah.
I was wondering, so the model that you use, which I think is really effective, is that you sell products to high-end consumers
I know, we would love to do that, and we've thought about it and talked about it, and it's almost been one of those things where, price-wise, there has to, a consumer has to have the sort of luxury of extra money that they'll want to use to buy a product that also gives back. Because our products, although, I think they deserve the amount of money they're priced at, they are more expensive than most bags. So if you are living in a lot of those countries, you just may not have that kind of money. But that said, I've been on a safari in Kenya. Like, there are definitely tourism pockets going to so many of these countries, so why not sell to the tourists who are also there, visiting the country? So not just tourists. I think there is a way to sell locally, and we definitely sell a bit in the Philippines, actually, and different countries, but it's not kind of a groundswell yet. Hopefully it will be more so. And China, to be honest. China obviously is like the biggest growing market, yet there is such need there too. Mm-hmm.
How did your time at Princeton, if it did at all, influence your journey through this company or your establishment of this company?
Yeah, I know. It's sort of, again, it's one of those things in retrospect, it all kind of makes sense. When I was at Princeton, I was involved, beyond studying anthropology and photography, which sort of lend itself nice to what I'm doing. I also helped organize, I was involved in the international, I was trying to think of this on the way over, they had an international fashion show over, it was part of this like international festival. So I helped organize the fashion show. And then also I helped organize Operation Style. I was like the co-chair. Is that still happening? Hope so. Sad, I feel so old. At the time, it was the largest student-attended event of the year. So it was this fun fashion show on Friss, the lawn in the back. And with that, I wanted to highlight student designers, and I wanted to design myself. So I did a little section where 5 of us created little mini collections. In my collection, I went to vintage stores and I repurposed different antique fabrics and I hired a local girl who knew how to sew and made a collection. So so not only academically, but I would say my sort of extracurricular activities and things I was involved in were very much fashion oriented, but also, was very interested in the eco. And had this club been around, I would have been a full, force member of it. But unfortunately it wasn't. So I think more and more, also social enterprise. I heard this year, I talked to, I think, Professor Danner, who is now, had a class on this, which at the time, it wasn't even a term or a recognized way of doing business. So those are all things I encourage everyone to take advantage of, because I would have loved to. Yeah.
So I'm taking a class right now on international fashion models and sort of how trends are influencing the fashion industry. So being a model yourself and having sort of feedbacks, do you feel that there's more of a shift towards sustainable fashion right now, or is there a shift in mindset?
I do think there's a shift. I think there was a major sort of trendy shift, maybe in 2008, 2009, where it was much more talked about. And then with the recession, I think it's become a little less talked about. And people are a little more price conscious and all that stuff. But I think it's one of those things, or for me at least it is, once you know, there's no going back. So if you know that a regular cotton t-shirt versus an organic cotton t-shirt, puts X amount of waste in the water system, you kind of can't get that out of your mind when you're buying a regular t-shirt. Yet, it's not as prevalent when you shop. I was thinking, even as I was walking, I was like, I'm not really wearing anything that's super sustainable. This, actually, I did purposely wear this jacket. This jacket is repurposed from old sailor outfits, which is quite cool. So there are things you can find, but it's a bit more of a hunt as a shopper if you just it's not an everyday find at this point. But yeah, more and more, I would say it is hopefully a growing trend, and one to stay. And I hate the word trend, because trend seems to think it's gonna come and go. I don't think it's that way, hopefully.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any plans to make anything out of bamboo? Because I think that the issue with cotton is not only the waste it creates, but also the water it consumes.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe you can talk
Yeah, I did with my little fashion line make these and bamboo's so cozy. If you guys have felt bamboo fabric, bamboo cotton blend, organic cotton blend. I've heard though, I made that and then friends of mine who started another eco fashion line were like, oh, we never use bamboo. It's horrible for the environment. So I've heard both sides of it. Yeah, so.
What's the truth in it?
I think bamboo, anything we create, whether it's organic cotton or, nothing we consume is good for the environment. So it's better for the environment. It's better than traditional cotton, but yeah, that's always the caveat. You can't be like, this is perfect and helping the world. It's helping the world because it's a better alternative, but it's not great. So I think buying things that you wear to death is probably better than consuming a lot. And this whole trend, again, the trend of sort of fast fashion and Topshop and H&M and all that is fun and fine, but you're not meant to buy something and only wear it one season. I kind of really believe that whether you buy something that is eco-friendly or not, it should be something you want to wear for at least 10 years, if possible. Yeah.
I'm wondering about the actual food part of the production process.
Mm-hmm.
Are you working with specific distributors of food? Do you have a say in what menus or food options are available?
Yeah, no, so feed is not, we have, so we're a for-profit, we actually have a feed foundation nonprofit, but both entities, we're not the ones on the ground delivering the food, so we're relying on UNICEF and the World Food Program, and their scientists and their expertise to be delivering what's necessary. So the main program we support again is school feeding, and that's this corn soya blend that's literally has iron and zinc and all these things sort of fortified into this. It's like a cornmeal porridge, which actually tastes fairly good, kind of like a sweet porridge. So we're not directly involved in that part of it all. Mm-hmm.
How did you go about finding the sources for your natural and organic textiles?
It's funny. When we started working in China, I said, okay, I want the cotton we use to be organic cotton, because in my mind and what consumers have now, I think demand of companies that are doing good is that they also be good in what they're made of, or better. And in emailing with the factory, I said, okay, I want, to use this organic material, and she emailed back saying, what's organic? And I was like, oh gosh, this is gonna be interesting. And then, we just sort of pushed back and said, this is really important to us. And it's, they were able to source this organic cotton twill that we now use in most of our bags. So, and burlap, which is the fabric I wanted to use design-wise, because a lot of the food rations distributed by the World Food Program used to be distributed in burlap bags. So I wanted that sort of aesthetic connection back to the cause as well. And the great thing about burlap is that it's made of a natural jute, and jute grows like a weed, so there's no need for pesticides. So it's essentially a natural fiber anyway. So yeah, like I said, I think there's definitely a growing awareness about what fabric's eco and what's not. And now we wanted to make sort of more sporty bags, like backpacks and a cool duffel bag, and we make it out of recycled polyester nylon. So again, if nothing's perfect or great, but there are alternatives regardless of what aesthetic you're sort of designing to or going for. But it's a learning. Mm-hmm.
So before you said that you're collaborating with UNICEF to deliver the food to the people in need. So do you specify to UNICEF, I want the money to go to Rwanda? Is that
so we can earmark, so how the organizations work, each organization has a different threshold. So I think with UNICEF it's 50,000 to specify a specific country, because they just can't be bothered unless it's below that. So if you raise up to a certain amount, you can specify the country. So but generally what's better and what organizations prefer is a non-earmarked donation, because then they can put it to where the need is greatest. So right now, a massive famine is happening in the Horn of Africa. A lot of the funds are needed there. And so they're able, with funds that are more flexible, to kind of give to where they need it most. But yet with Rwanda, they were thrilled because we literally checked that budget for them for the entire year of 2009, which was great. Mm-hmm.
So talking about growing groups a little bit, what are your plans for expansion? How do you see kind of the few women working on the ground feeding into those?
Yeah, I'm really at kind of a moment of, to be very honest, figuring that out. But definitely want to continue to support the women, and that's why I brought that bag I passed around. So we took the fabric, oh, there it is, ended up back there. Took the fabric and sent it to China, and they made one of our traditional feed bags, but lining that fabric. Because the women there don't sew, they just, do the dyeing. So I think there are other ways through feed as well that we can continue to kind of support them. There was a conference, TED Women, where they ordered feed bags made of that fabric for their conference. So there's been fun kind of opportunities to give these women extra business. I would say, yeah, I think the fashion industry is a tough one, and it's so fast paced and kind of crazy because you deliver. Right now there's spring in store, although it feels like spring, but it really should feel like winter. So everything, you have to work so far ahead and have so many deliverables. So when I started, which was just a learning for me, I said, okay, I want to do 12 looks, and that's it. And a lot of the big department stores I approached said, okay, this is the start of something. Come back to us when you have 80 pieces. So a lot of stores, really big stores, really want to, they'll take then 10 of those 80 pieces, but they want that choice, which was kind of, I'm used to the feed one bag, I'll forever sell that. So it's not something that's a seasonal turnaround thing. So something in me really is I don't know, it's a little, the whole fast sort of fashion cycle, and in order to be a player in like a known brand in that world, that's what's required. Doesn't sit well with me yet. So although I want to continue with the fashion line, and I will I've done it, now with Calypso, which makes sense with the bright colors, and just kind of figuring out these niche little ways to do it. Something doesn't quite feel right in terms of creating a fashion house around it if it's not going to be as sustainable for the women and for our company. So the hope is to keep it going, but in sort of small ways. Sounds like I'm underselling it. In big ways, but done in the right sort of authentic way. Oh, way in the back.
I'm a fellow anthropologist, so I'm pretty sure as an anthropologist it sounded like you like a lot of engaging with people. That's what you do anthropology. So I wonder, in your context, since a lot of the program is about giving money within or being given to communities, et cetera, so the connection with your communities gets lost in a way, or probably you're missing it. So in your experience still, did you discover any really interesting programs that managed to engage well with the communities, to inspire them to change their eating habits? Because this is so key to figure out really engaging ways. I've been experimenting with collective bread making. My whole thing is also about the Bread Houses Network. Like, there must be interesting ways to engage people who love eating healthy, in the case of obesity, because of course with the case of hunger.
In America, you mean?
The point is just, so the program that you're supporting the states fighting obesity and
I know. That's a tough one, and that's why we haven't quite engaged in America as much, because I think Feed will forever be a hunger fighting organization, but with that we're hoping that we're fighting hunger with, obviously, ideally nutritious food. It's a tough one, and it's sad. I mean, if anyone here hasn't seen like Food Inc. or any of those movies, a raw piece of broccoli costs more than a family going to McDonald's. So the fact that here in America you can feed your family, not better, but you can actually have full bellies from McDonald's versus going to a grocery store and buying a raw vegetable is pretty crazy, because that hamburger has been through so many different processes. So it's definitely, the food system as a whole is hugely broken and definitely an issue. And one other program abroad that the World Food Program is doing that's good to note in the past few years, so it's something fairly new, is called Purchase for Progress. So they're instead of, unfortunately, what a lot of food aid is our excess corn and food going to developing countries. And it floods the market. It doesn't help local farmers build their business or be able to sell to their neighbors. So what they do is they source food locally and then use it to feed hungry people locally, which seems like a no-brainer, and it's a lot of logistics and figuring out how to make that happen. But it really is such a wonderful program because it is giving farmers business and livelihoods, and thus those farmers and their families have more of an income and more sustainable support. But then it's also helping people who literally just need that food assistance. And in America, 1 in 6 people rely on food assistance this past year. So that statistic is really shocking and surprising. And we're proud, coming out soon, hopefully in the fall, so tune in, is a documentary called Finding North, which we were kind of initial supporters of and help get sort of the seed capital to help it start. And Participant bought it. It just showed at Sundance. So it's going to be a really kind of hard-hitting movie about issues of hunger in America. So I recommend it. I'm actually seeing it tomorrow, so I haven't seen it yet, but I'm sure it's wonderful and very educational. Cool. I'll let you guys go. Thank you.